All right, welcome everyone. My name is Julie Seitz and I'm one of the Cardinal project managers. We are so excited to have some folks here for day 2 of our as is current state of fixed assets and lease accounts. So for folks who weren't here yesterday, we're just going to do a quick brief presentation just to walk through expectations. So we're going to get into what we're doing, why we're doing it. Alrighty, so first name, welcome. I'll welcome you again, but what we will do is just a quick round robin because we do have some new faces. I want people to know who's here, who's in the Zoom, and what you do awesome. All right, so going back over to our welcome and introductions. So I mentioned that I've been on the Cardinal project for 15+ years. Worked on the original finance implementation and then HCM, and now came back to work on our fixed assets.
Brandon Pepper. I'm an analyst with Cardinal working on the fixed asset and lease accounting work, and I've been here for about 6 months.
Hi, and I'm Kim White. Been with Cardinal since it began. Worked on the finance and HCM implementations and retired and have come back to work on special projects and post-production support.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dana Smith. I'm the change lead at Cardinal, longtime state employee who retired and came back to Cardinal as a contractor.
Nobody. Hi, I'm Stacey McCracken. I'm the Cardinal Director. Thanks for coming today.
I'm Vijay. I work with production support.
I'm Sridhar Kamatala, the approach at the Ford Finance Feed.
Awesome. And we do have a couple Cardinal folks on the phone. We'll start with Chantel.
Hi, I'm Chantel Cox, GL team. Been with Cardinal for a very long time, like everyone else. But
How about Bilal?
Yep, this is Bilal Khan. I am the Cardinal Finance Production Support Manager.
And Shravanti?
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Shravanti Gandhi. I am the Cardinal Production Support Deputy Lead.
Anybody else from Cardinal? No? Trader, do we have everybody from Cardinal?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. All right, so let's start with the agency folks. Oh, my good friend in the back.
Emily Shea, General Accounting Manager, BDH.
Love it. And then let's start up front and we'll work our way around.
Laura Merson, analyst for Department of Accounts. Nadine Charity, lead analyst on capital assets, Lease's Department of Accounts.
Wonderful. I hate to put you on the spot. It's okay. It's nice to make an entrance. If you want to go ahead.
Sure, I'm Cindy Fellows, Controller and Fiscal Officer.
Excellent.
Christina Vargo, Chief Operations Officer, Virginia Department.
I'm Melissa Council. Sharon Hayes, Director of Finance, Virginia Department.
I'm Sharon Blue, Acting Fiscal Officer and Reporting Manager for the
Queen Paddock.
I'm Crystal Copeland. I'm the GL Manager at
Director of Finance Management.
Daniel Dos Santos, fixed asset and lease accounts from BDH.
Katie Cates, I am the Deputy Director of General Accounting at BDH.
Matthew Wiggins, Assistant Director at DOA.
Susan Jones, Director of Financial Reporting at the Department of Accounts.
I am Paige Elsbeck, Controller at the Department of Social Services.
Betsy Wolfson, Assistant Planning for General Accounting and Financial Reporting.
Jason Tittelli, Assistant Controller for Capital Assets and Inventory at BDOT.
Harris, Capital Assets Supervisor.
Lanson, Lisa Sabita, Analyst, BDOT.
For a long time.
Yeah.
I am Julie Wong, Controller for the DGS.
Jason Cornby, State Corporation Commission, Budget Financial. That's easy. Operations.
Karen Foote, Department of Conservation and Recreation, chief leader that is. And I'm the director.
Yeah. Again, I think all that time. Awesome. And then we have a couple more folks on the call who weren't able to be in person with us today. Why don't we start alphabetically?
This is Amy Gilmore, and I'll go ahead and introduce Chanel Hobbs too. We're both deputy comptrollers with the State Corporation Commission.
Clint,
I think David Morrison.
Just David Morrison. Yep, David Morrison with the Chief Financial Officer with the Virginia State Police.
oh, great, super duper. And anybody else? Is that everybody on the call?
Cliff
One person
Goldsboro,
introduce him?
Cliff Goldsboro, Finance Director, DEQ.
Thank you, perfect. All righty, well, thank you all for joining. Current state. So it is so important that we always level set where are we and where are we going? So when we, the Commonwealth, years ago, Kim White said, I've been on Cardinal forever, since 2006. And there were these original requirements and original processes that were being defined. And back in those days, fixed assets was blinking on. But it was always considered because we knew that FAACS and LAS at the time, now LAS Plus, needed to be incorporated into the business processes because they are really siloed currently. And what we said is, oh, we were always going to do it. We were always going to do it. Lo and behold, the HCM came, and then we went into production support and had to do an upgrade, et cetera, et cetera. But now is the time for assets and lease. So the good news is that we have requirements all the way back from 2006. So 20 years ago, we created these requirements and we created the business processes. Lots have changed in the last 20 years. And that's why we're here today, so that we can not only come up with what is our as is state, but then we will go forward with what has changed in the last 20 years. So yesterday we talked about FAACS and we talked through what is FAACS. It's sort of our statewide system for capital assets. There's the controlled assets or controllable assets that are also available. And every agency gets to use it a little bit differently. So there are agencies that are central users and use it online. There are agencies who are summary, thank you, my words, summary users, and they are only sending in basically accounting entry type things. And then there are agencies that are hybrid, and even more so, there's those different fund agencies that provide only attachments to the app. The system is web-based and it is maintained by DOA. So the folks over here, they've carved out a little spot, but those are your people who are responsible for financial reporting and not only FAACS, but also LAS Plus. We also interface to Cardinal on a nightly basis. So all the goodness that goes into the system does move towards Cardinal and keeps us current. And we also do daily reconciliation for fund 1,500, 1,500, 50,000. And we also know that some agencies, so the reason that some folks are even in here today and yesterday was that some agencies have their own standalone system or a system that goes into their core ERP. And if we want to know about why do you do that, what is different? So for Lease for LAS Plus, been around for a long time, since I think 87. But it serves as for our current leases as well as our Savitas. It is also web-based and also DOA, and it supports GASB 87 and 96, and who knows 104, and maybe a couple others that are coming down the pipe too. And similarly, it's that the higher education institutions and the enterprise funds that can go directly to those attachments to the app. So that is current state of who's in the zoo. Then we talk about what is this project and what is the vision. So as I said, we are looking to replace these items. They are these systems. They are on Cold Fusion, which will be retired and no longer used with the Commonwealth. So we need to get off of those unsupported softwares. In order to do that, what the Commonwealth has said is let's bring them into cardinal scope rather than keeping them siloed. The good news is that whenever we talk about an ERP, it's an enterprise resource planning. That is what Cardinal is based off of. It's based off of Oracle PeopleSoft functionality. But what it does is it has modules. And those modules say, I have procurement, I have payables, I have general ledger, and now we will bring in scope for lease accounting, lease administration, as well as fixed assets, is what they call it, rather than or they call it asset management rather than. At any rate, we're bringing those into scope. The reason that we're doing that is obviously we have a bunch of benefits that come to it. We will be reducing risk to the Commonwealth. This is a huge dollar amount that whenever we talk about assets and leases that need to be maintained. So we will be reducing risk for those aging systems. This is our proven standard for other governments are already using these functionality. So great news is that we're not the first. We're not going to be the pioneer taking first arrows. And it will meet the Commonwealth needs and the requirements. When I talk about requirements, those are the individual pieces and parts that make up an entire business process. So it's all of the reports, it's all of the security, it's all of the, I think we were talking about how many fields can I get on that darn the fixed asset transaction yesterday. All of those are individual requirements, and it will live on. We will be leveraging the integrations that are already available, which is super duper. And then we'll be creating some new integrations. So one of the things that we have talked about is the integration with EVA that the Commonwealth currently does not have between Cardinal and EVA. We will look to bring that into scope so that we will have some goodness come out of our process. There's also embedded workflows. So one thing that we know today is that the separation of duties and even passing transactions along, they are really governed by role. So a user may have a view access or an update access or a release access that they do in FAACS. But that's the only way that they're doing it. They don't get notifications. They don't get those. And there's an amazing audit that comes along with the system. So where we need to make sure that we do have separation of duties, or the other thing that is who did that transaction, somebody in the agency will know who and when they did it, so that we have all of that audit trail capability as well. We also have a document attachment functionality, and then there's lots of reporting tools and capabilities to make sure that the reports, not only for the financial level reports, but also operational reports are there available. So there's a lot of amazing things. The big, it's small though, is this little beauty at the bottom, which is the asterisk area, is that this project right now is right now talking about it in the General Assembly. It has not yet been approved, but we look legally, but the business case is fabulous because we have to have maintenance on these amazing systems, and if systems are going away and no longer supported, then we have to have something to replace it. So there's your business case. So we're really hopeful for the approval of that. And then we will have an overall kickoff of our project in the fall. We're looking at an October go live. Or
We're not that good.
We're looking at an October launch for this project. It's a good thing that you guys laugh whenever I say stuff. Then I know. All right. Okay, so that is that was our benefits, the objectives. So I need y'all to put on your thinking caps. And what we need to do is, and we did this yesterday as well, is we are trying to figure out what is done today. And we need it for not only the people and the process and the interaction with other entities, but we also need to understand your pain points that go along with those things. So we ask that you think about what is current state and how is that a challenge to you, or how is it good in some sense. But we are going to specifically look at our business process flows and our narratives. I'll get to that in a second. We're looking for opportunities for improvement. So whenever we talk about improvements, this is your wish list, if you will. If there are things that you want to bring into, that you think would be really helpful, or if you are one of those agencies that have an external system for leases, we are very interested in understanding if it were so attractive. Come on to Cardinal, you wouldn't have to have that external system. We will talk about integration requirements with existing systems, and then we will capture all of those management and operational reporting needs. So it's a big what is it? Throw, I don't know, whatever the terminology, whatever the idiom is. It's a big lift, and we're asking for you all to come up with your best thinking. You may not think about everything today. Some of us are analytic, and it takes us a while to process and think about things. So it doesn't need to just be one and done. Here you are. This is a process. And so if there are things that come into your mind a little bit later, then great. We're looking for that kind of information as well. Great. Okay, so from a business process perspective, we have 4 major business processes. Yesterday we made it in we call it FAACS, which is funny. But for fixed assets, we have business process 1, 2, and 4, which are acquire and maintain assets, manage assets, retirements, and disposals, and then manage physical inventory. We didn't get to physical inventory yesterday. We will do an online meeting that's maybe an hour, maybe an hour and a half, to go through that business process. And we'll make sure that it's within like a time period, not next week or the week after. We'll get that out to you as soon as possible. Today, we will be talking about business process 3, which is our enter and maintain leases and SBITAs. Some people call them SBITAs. Did I say that name? Yeah. Again, tomato, but those are our 2 business processes. So whenever we talk about the business process, we keep them separated, but we also recognize that there's a fluidity that goes along with them. So if we're going to start with the leases, and Brandon's going to walk you through that, but as you're walking through it, like, what happens with the SBITAs, and we might say, hey, just wait for that one, because we're going to talk about it as our okie doke. To help us go through that amazing business process, and I see my friend that didn't want to sit up front because he knows that I'm still like that. But we have 3 documents in front of you, and the 3 things that we'll be doing is we will go through our flows. These are in Visio, nicely printed to you today, and each of them have little shapes. Brandon will go over the shapes and what they all mean. But we have a business process flow, and it's meant to be, how is the data passed from piece to piece? And is it internal, external, reports, interfaces, batch processes? Each of the flows, so you'll see at the very top of that on page 2, this is enter and manage leases 3.0, and then 3.1 is the enter and process leases. That business process, that naming, that number convention, is then brought down into the step level. So whenever we say it's 3.1.1, that is the first step. And then the beauty of this is that it ties to, so excited, it ties to the narrative. So each narrative step is then depicted in a paragraph, and that number convention goes back to your flow. So you can see all of the goodness that's provided in there. So we may not have put every little step in the flow because there's a lot of stuff that goes on. So you may see that some of that is just captured. The narrative at the end, we will also talk about this. One of my favorite parts, it's a template. So what it does is it makes us think about different things. Starting on page 8 of the narrative, you'll see our assumptions and our considerations. So with our considerations, we try to think of it in the form of the system, as well as change management, as well as audit, as well as blah, blah, blah. But there's considerations for each one of these. So it helps us pull out what are the other things that we need. we'll talk about that at the end. And then finally, you also have a document for pain points. When we sent you these packets, originally electronic format, we sent you the pain points in a spreadsheet, which is easy for us because that's how we do everything. And here in cart. However, what we also try to do is group them so that we can have discussion around. So the details are all in that pain point spreadsheet, but we tried to bring them up a level for discussion purposes in the PowerPoint. All right, so that is the overview of documents.
Think so.
Okay. And I'm going to pass the torch to Brandon to walk us through our first business process. Brandon, take it away. Oh, are there any questions? Not yet. All right, good luck.
Second to bring up the flow document, we'll start going over shapes. Bring up the layer. This is all in front of you. We're going to be going over the flow diagram step by step with some decisions in between. And that flow diagram will consist of each shapes and their meanings. So the first regular box is a step that somebody completes and performs in the system. This is kind of, where all of the majority of the steps in the flow diagram take place. Next, we have a box with the 2 lines inside it, and that is going to be like a system or batch process that runs. This trapezoid is manual operation, something that you all do outside of the system. And then the diamond is a decision point or a decision outcome. These are kind of fit in between some of the steps to direct, where we branch off and aspects of our business process. The square represents an entity name, and you won't see that in the flows today, so don't worry. The start and end signifies where the business processes begin and end. That's important for, where we eventually end up from the steps that we complete. The paper shaped shape is a document. So the forms or reports that you all deal with. And the on-page connector is generally important, but it's not included in either of the flows we looked at today. So wouldn't worry about that, but you might have seen it yesterday on some of the fixed asset flows and diagrams, and it helps us, bridge the process between pages or, flow or parts of the business process that are separate on the page, in and out of different areas. Finally, the last home plate shaped, it's a base plate, and that represents where we connect in or from other business processes that we will go over. I think there's only one in the flows today, but we'll definitely touch on what that means for the work that we do. For the first flow. So I'll be covering the first section, 3.1, enter and process leases, and later leading the lead points discussion. This section covers how agencies enter and manage lease activity in LAS Plus from procurement through the year-end reconciliation. So similar to what we talked about with fixed assets yesterday, the first couple of steps are, high-level procurement steps. We haven't gotten deep down into the details of procurement in terms of our documentation, but that definitely is an area we want to ask questions, gather input, and see how you all are working with procurement in terms of leases and subus. So the first step, procure leased assets, starts with agencies initiating procurement in EVA following COBA procurement policy. The PO, receipt, and other documentation from procurement supports the LAS Plus entry and any audit requirements. From there, we reach step 2, which is lease identification. The Commonwealth institutes a proactive approach to identifying leases. The key action here is engaging the agency's LAS Plus representatives early before the lease is executed. That's so that they're aware of new lease coming and prepared for timely entry within the 30-day window that's required by the CAC. This is, similar to what we covered with assets yesterday. The earlier the handoff happens between the people procuring the lease and whoever's entering it into LAS Plus, the less likely it is that the lease will get missed or entered late. So I want to follow up and ask some questions about procurement. Can anybody share what the procurement process for leases looks like at your agency? There's a lot to talk about yesterday. I'm sure that there's a lot going on in this area. I guess I can ask a few more specific questions. How many people at your agency are involved between the time of, lease is procured and when it eventually gets entered into LAS Plus? Are there many people involved in the process or only a couple?
Centralized agency, we decentralize that function. Each work unit, for example, software, things like that, leased. They can enter into these contracts, these agreements with the vendors. And then enter into EVA. Those kind of things. So what we do here is, again, it's not proactively, it's more of a reactive, we satisfy the reporting requirements. We pull that 200 report from EVA every year to identify the leases. And then accountants work with Office of Information Technology, Information Management to identify those and then target those work units to contact them to provide the information. So that's on the IT side, but on the regular leases, every month, yesterday I talked about our internal control, we have a form every month sent out to all the work units, say, hey, here's the report from LAS Plus, here's what we have, would you please review? And if you have new leases, here's our internal form, you need to fill out this form and send it back to us. So we do that on a monthly basis. We capture those that way. That is a decentralized agency. We do not have a central location or central division to have control, 100% control on this. But with the current requisition system, the RTS, yesterday I talked about, request to spend, probably the Office of Procurement and General Service should have some sort of a central control on this. However, that's our current process. It's a manual. It's a manual control.
It's good to get your perspective, the central signature.
To that, that's on the back end, what we do at the financial management office. At the front end, we have about 119 offices that each individual office has their own personnel. Certain offices have one buyer, one procurer that handles multiple offices. They go through their approval process with their leadership team and whatever channels, either certain leases have to go through Office of Procurement, General Services, other leases have to go through IT, and others probably don't. So from there, once they get their approval and they get their lease contracts and agreed upon, then they submit whatever they can. And then from the back end, we have those reports, we have those monthly checks and balances, so to speak.
Anybody else want to add on to what currently studying their agency?
We have a similar situation being decentralized as well. Leases can happen pretty much anywhere across VDOT. We do find that we have a lot of things where we have found leases and agreements that aren't explicitly labeled a lease. A lot of embedded leases and different contracts that are going on that can be really difficult to find.
And I just find out, all the storage leases, you must go through dress. As little as a little storage, 10 by 10, you must go through dress, and that is not understood across the agencies. We have identified some units are going out to sign these type of storage leases. Why? Because I just simply think, they're not aware of this policy. Yeah.
For Virginia State Police, we depend 99% on EVA. So what happened with our loaded monthly basis report for all the POs have been done during, for example, for February 2026. And the employee in my team has to do the research for each purchase order with the contract, because every PO has contract number. And because there is a qualification, as mentioned, the CAP manual, we have to decide if it's qualified as a short-term lease or long-term lease, also for the same process. And sometimes the potential report help us to figure out if there is any payment have been done with a voucher related to stabilitas or related to lease. We have to do same due diligence to decide if it's qualified or not. Since the next step, we have to qualify, we have to keep in LAS Plus.
So I'm hearing few manual processes, some of them are bridging the gap between systems, but some of them are analyzing contracts, which is probably not going to, something that's not going to go away with the system, but really appreciate that input. So I also wanted to ask, has your agency ever had a lease that was active for a while before anybody realized that it needed to be entered in the LAS Plus?
Yep.
Anybody want to share some of the, things that may have led to that, or some of the causes that led to those delays or anything being missed?
We had one that was actually with UVA. So it was initially looked at and dismissed because it was thought, well, that's in state. So we wouldn't capture that as a lease, but we, after a little bit more discussion, were able to come to the conclusion that UVA is outside the reporting area, so we would need to capture that one. We also had, want to talk about the fiber leases there?
Fiber leases? Fiber leases end up in all kinds of account numbers, depending on where they, whoever put the PO in for thinks it should go. So fiber leases end up in 6 different accounts. They don't realize they're actual leases that need to be recorded, because sometimes they write contracts for them and sometimes they don't. Sometimes they use the GSA contract, sometimes they don't. There's no consistency.
This is where VDOT allows telecom companies to put fiber on our right of way. And they actually install little, I don't know what to call them, stations, cabinets. And they actually lease back to VDOT space within those cabinets to light the fiber for our traffic operations system. So those got missed initially.
So I love how you're getting into some of my next questions, which were going to be some edge cases about, which contracts are, you run into that weren't obviously leases, and that's really helpful. Have you seen any other unique sort of arrangements that may not have been missed, but something that we need to capture or pay attention to through the procurement process?
Vito likes to label things that don't look like contracts when they write their contracts. Like there's a contract out there with the FHI for Microsoft. Oh, this is the Vito, yeah, sorry.
We want,
I mean,
that
we
just
can
be.
go over Sabitas with the questions. I feel like it's all applicable in the same realm.
I'll do it. So initially, one of our struggles, especially with Speedas, was that Vita has contracts with companies like SHI, Thundercat, Carousel. What's the other one? There's several.
EDW,
E plus. And so what we're finding that our, the people within VDOT are doing is that we might have a Civita that is, WDesk. We use WDesk for several things within fiscal. But, and we will use that. It is embedded in our process. We've implemented all kinds of things around this. We have to have that. We know we're going to use that for years going forward. But because they can play off the different warehouses, that's the only thing I can think to call it, wholesalers of these of the software, they'll only write the PO for 1 year because they know that they're going to go to one of the others and get a lower price and shop rank.
Yep.
So like function over form, we know we're going to have that for years going forward, but yet it's showing up as a short-term lease because we're only writing the CO 1 year. There's no contract.
Oh, that's a really good example. And I feel like I've heard the same thing, you know, that the financial reporting team has seen that occurring at agencies as well, where procurement is purposely writing short-term leases. And like you said, there, the availability of the software from vendors just allows them to be able to do that purposefully and kind of circumvent the processes that we're trying to set up here. So, thank you.
So I think is known for everything, any kind of renewal of anything, they write down maintenance. Yeah, maintenance service, even if it's the Microsoft Select contract, which is embedded in the SHI contract, which is actually finance purchase of the perpetual licenses, 3-year contract.
So we're getting into the, you know, the technical details of analyzing these contracts and making the decisions in the Sabita process and seeing, you know, what our procurement team has got this. Hit another question. How does turnover or bringing new staff into the process, you know, affect the handoff between procurement and anybody entering records in the LAS Plus? You all seen that as an obstacle or challenge?
At VDH, that's probably one of the more common issues why we don't see any lease forms consistently as timely as we should. One of the big things, and I wanted to mention this, was for software, a lot of not only turnover, but the lack of knowledge and understanding that, hey, when we do purchase a license or when we do get into an agreement for a license, that is considered a lease. So a lot of that focus was part of our team starting last year and into this year. So that was one of our struggles.
With VDOT, a lot of our IT personnel are contractors. Yeah, it's been a burden is, we have turnover in IT and it's hard to get, people up and running with considerations on all their procurements as well. What's a Sabita? It's a perpetual license. It's a maintenance contractor, how, at least how we're defining per cabinet. Yes. When we get people in that are that kind of start to catch on and then they leave. So it's turnover.
Maybe part of it is also, resources coming from outside governmental accounting, into governmental positions like we're seeing in IT, that wouldn't have been aware of this in the past role. That's something new to them. So this is kind of more training on the accounting guidance and knowledge on the accounting guidance than, using the system and knowing what to do in that area, but it's all very helpful. Does anybody else have anything to add to the procurement discussion?
We get the leadership involved. It's tone from the top. Most non-finance people could care less about financial reporting, Sabita, whatever you're doing. Doesn't matter to me, as long as I get my bills paid, get my work done, why would I care about your business, right? So it's tone from the top. We always start from the top. Get the CFO involved, get the CIO involved, and then filter it down. They provide the directions. First, YFM is reaching out to you. We need to support this initiative. They're gonna give you the form, they're gonna have meetings with you. So that's how we get our work done.
That's great. Right. So we can always talk more about procurement later, but in terms of moving from step 2 lease identification to step 3 contract for and analyze the lease. In this step, the agency enters into a lease agreement, files the documentation, and analyzes the lease to determine classification, which could be short-term, long-term, finance purchases, and that drives how it's recorded and reported. You also probably analyze the contracts to determine separate components in the lease. And obviously, I've got a few questions just to understand from your area perspective. So, do any of your agencies deal with lease agreements that contain multiple components that need to be broken apart and separated? You all seen that before? I guess, does anybody want to share how often you see that? Maybe rare or rare or regularly? Frequency for that?
You mean by components?
It is, I guess the lease agreement with different components is, something which might be like an equipment with software, I believe.
You know, we're just talking about one today.
Fiber.
The network switches, playing obsolescence. You buy the hardware, but software is, the software, the operator. It's a bit based, and if you stop paying the bill, then you're above the paper.
Yeah, you see these things bundled into contracts and the kind of accounting guidance as you separate them, price them, and account for them separately. So I'm sure that you all see that every now and then, but it's definitely something that we want to keep in mind as we forward to the system and evaluate the requirements. I guess I want to add who at your agencies is making the classification decisions. I assume that's somebody in an accounting or financial position. That's not coming from anybody in procurement, or just want to kind of confirm, how that works in your operations.
We have a finance manager.
They work on that. So they work together, or they kind of, split up the duties as they come?
One will, the manager basically manages instead of the other just the fixed asset. Bigger lift. There. So, but they each other up. They each. That's what we.
Did IT any kind of software that just has to get they built us a system where they would designate if it's Sabita, And, I'm able to like cross-represent it. Tremendously. Working out.
Sounds like
That's
a
a
good
work
idea.
As well as I'd like it to work.
Here, here. So if nobody has anything else on classification, I will proceed in the flow from step 3. We arrive at a decision point where, we look at, are you a LAS Plus agency? What we mean by that is, are you entering your leases into LAS Plus, or if not, are you providing financial statement and lease data to DOA for financial reporting purposes? If that is your agency, then you follow the route down here to the end of the process after you submit your information to DOA at the end of the year. And if you are entering your leases in the LAS Plus, then we follow the yes route here to step 5, which is capturing lease information. The LAS Plus representatives gather the required data from the executed lease agreement, such as lease terms, payment terms, maybe interest rates that's applicable in preparation for entry. Are there any data elements that are considered like harder to pull from lease agreements than others? Has anybody noticed anything?
Implicit interest rate.
No. Has anybody else had trouble with determining interest rates when entering leases into Vitas? I feel like everybody must,
I
because,
think that was the hardest part of the implementation.
Yeah.
Was figuring out an implicit interest rate, because nobody wanted to make a decision on what that needed to be. But we couldn't get it from our internal financial planning people. I think APA didn't want us to go to Treasury, and it was just round and round. So, yeah, somebody needs to figure that out. And just put it in the system. Just put it in the system.
is it love to
Yeah.
make it as easy as we can. I know that there's kind of a progression in the way that we're supposed to look at the interest rates we enter. I believe it's stated in the contract or implicit. If you have like an incremental borrowing rate, then you may use the MELP and then the default rate. So we'll see how we can reflect the decision process for interest rates in the system as we go through the requirements. But we know that that is one of the biggest pain points with dealing with leases in Civitas, because the implicit interest rate is, it's not always so we all we've noticed that the default rate is used very heavily in the system for what's. That was, I had a bunch of questions on interest rates, but it sounds like we're all in agreement there, so. From step 5, we move over to step 6, which is entering the lease information. Agencies have 30 days from the first lease payment to enter the lease in LAS Plus. The timely entry ensures that lease liabilities and assets are recorded in the current fiscal period, and everything is accurate in the system. If a lease contains multiple components, each component is entered as a separate lease record. So just, pulling that back from the step where we analyze the contract into the way it's being entered in the system. Does anybody want to kind of walk us through what they experienced when entering leases in LAS Plus? Guess how long does it seem to take you to complete a lease for anybody that is entering anything in the system? Have you all?
I think that it's easy. It takes a few minutes to create any record in LAS Plus. But only the time you consumed, how to decide if this qualified or not based on your review for the purchase order and the contract to try to align with the cap manual conditions. So I would say it takes was 5 minutes to create any equipment. Plus packages, etc.
We always kind of feel the same way that the data entry is easy, but the, accounting and the decisions that go into the guidance are the difficult part. I mean, the sooner part.
I'd like to point out, I knew that when Gatsby 96 just came out, we were able to upload into LAS Plus. In the last year, we were told, no, you have to enter them one at a time. So we're a very large agency. We're facing 200 Savitas. This is at year end. I came in about a couple months before year end. I was literally scrambling, trying to get those into the system. And I begged, I said, can you allow me to upload? And I was told, no, absolutely not. So we have recruited other staff to help to key them. We were able to key all of them, 200 Savitas within a week, including getting the access to Lease. That person has to do the training.
Yep.
And to get the access. And then we had two staff members full-time to key those. We were able to get those into the system one at a time. Yeah, but my wish list is to, in this new, I'll upload 200.
And what you were describing sounds painful and expensive, and that is one of the biggest pain points that I've already captured. That, you all used to be able to import, bulk amounts of records, and now you're unable to. So that's definitely something that will put as a requirement in the new system, being able to get more records in the more time, especially with the abilities that you all have to organize, things and videos and spreadsheets. Hopefully we can make that easier.
Does anybody in the audience, do you have a system that captures your leases that rather than doing a spreadsheet upload that you would do interface? No interface. A standalone? Oh, sure. Covatrax. Would you want it to interface? Or is it
With LAS Plus.
not LAS Plus, Cardinal, the future?
So we don't have a standalone Lease system. Our own financial system does not have Lease module.
Okay. Okay.
No, how can we interface?
Okay. Covatrax, so. Right.
The journal entry they're posting.
Yep.
That's happening. To manually track all of it.
Mhm.
These is scenario. So different, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's why it's different, and maybe that's optional.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll circle back with you for DGS Covatrax.
Other difficulties or obstacles?
We have, used to be, paper, kind of like Excel-based form, we move forward. This is across the agency. That was more like an internal control, the initiator of the lease. These with, major reporting data, and there's like here, paper that's documented, because really there's only one contact that goes into LAS Plus, the Governor's Kingdom. So, fully this Cardinal implementation will have anybody who has Cardinal access to process. That would maybe some of what we're doing external to it, but as far as the reviewing data.
Yeah.
Obviously.
So you're kind of suggesting an approval workflow which is or was being managed internally via, communication or spreadsheet documentation?
Yeah, we're using like a Microsoft Power platform.
Okay.
It's internally developed.
Anybody else looking for some sort of approval workflow for these sorts of records, leases and years?
Yeah, I think this is a good point. As for any LAS Plus, it doesn't have a segregation yet between the processor and the upload. I wonder why not same as FAACS process.
I'll say that segregation of duties isn't strictly enforced in either system. You may have it set up that way in FAACS with your security roles, but I think the reason why that's not entirely enforced is because some agencies are small enough where they don't have the personnel managing leases or fixed assets to fully segregate the duties. So, but that is a pain point that I have added to the list to say that that isn't systematically enforced. Would like to. Yep, is with like approvals. From step 6, we arrive at another decision point, whether there are any changes to the lease. I'll say if there are no changes, we would go to step 11. So we kind of bypass this side of the flow. But in the case where there are changes, we look at the next decision point, which is whether there's a permanent improvement. And the accounting for permanent improvements, the leases, we would follow the yes route, which is a base plate that connects to the FA 1.0 business process that we covered yesterday with fixed assets. Essentially, the permanent improvement or leasehold improvement would be entered as an asset in FAACS. So this is where it connects to the process we covered yesterday. If there's no permanent improvement, then we've got a step 7 to update leases. Throughout the lease life cycle, agencies may need to update the records for data entry corrections, contract changes such as remeasurements or early terminations, or even guaranteed residual value adjustments. And when those occur, updates recalculate the principal and interest balances. So using the correct update method. One of the most common challenges we've identified is that agencies don't always use the correct method. For example, with editing fields instead of creating a remeasurement when contract terms change, or adding payment streams to avoid the remeasurement process. These workarounds can impact, by creating, incorrect liability calculations and amortization schedules. But it's a huge pain point that we captured where it may be driven by, avoiding the difficult part of the process. How do we enter the remeasurements, or it may be driven by a lack of knowledge or training in what is the right way to handle the changes to the contract that occur, while it's in flight. So, I guess I definitely wanted to ask, how many lease updates do your agencies typically process in a year? Or do you find these frequent or rare, such as early terminations or remeasurements?
Now you get told. You find out there'll be addendums to leases, but they think that they've already told us about the initial lease. You don't get told about any updates after.
So thoughts. So they just kind of come up when they come up, whatever's needed. These addendums, do they go through procurement, or, managing the contract, or do they come up from some team that deals with the leased asset or, the subscription software?
We're still learning.
Okay.
More than likely, it's going to be at the office level, less OPGS or OI, IT or procurement, general services, and that guy involved. But like Katie said, it's just going to be a point of communication. That needs to be.
But they're not doing like a CO to the contract or the PO, or are they?
We should.
They should.
Just what it could be,
A lot of education still needs to happen.
Okay, all right.
channels, and then therefore.
Doesn't get to you guys.
And then any updates to that lease doesn't get to us. So that's kind of.
Especially when there's system enhancements being done. And like a lot of the web-based, it's like all of a sudden they've met an addendum to get a whole new platform, but because it's still tied to the original lease, we don't find out about it until we just happen by chance to have a conversation and go, oh, wait a second.
It's a voucher that needs to be paid.
I think some of it is also analysis as to whether or not we have to edit any leases or specific, overall contract. December, a big project, any of the Xerox copiers, I think about has like 700 across the state, which is a lot. And, districts, residencies are adding copiers and copiers. Xerox, they would do one-off POs where they would move a set of copiers to a different location, terminating leases on whole blocks of copiers because moving, off the building, there's a lot of movement in that, in just that Xerox, that's the overall Xerox contract. Not to mention, the parent contract sets a rate for specific configurations, like the base configuration, but then some copiers will have like a 3-hole punch or a stapler or some type of special collate function, and so those have different rates.
Yeah.
And overall, we spent the whole month looking at Xerox copier data, only to find out the entire aggregate of everything was a wash. Like all the additions and removals didn't really add up to a material difference. We were projecting out to the end of the year, so we didn't end up changing at least at all.
So, from your project, you noticed a whole lot of things that needed to be changed and came up, and it seems like you dug into it and you found a lot that needed to be done. Were there things there that were, done late, like early termination, things that are probably 4 or 5 months later than they came up? Or
Say it's just difficult because, when we get a handle on what we thought our expected costs were going to be, it would change a month or two later. The location would come online and they would need a block of copies. We would sell the neighborhood. And, some copiers were just terminated. That's the fact it's Xerox. So it's really hard to tell. Built a whole spreadsheet, analyze the net effect of, based on this configuration and this monthly cost. And we kicked out all of the variable costs such as impressions. See that affect what we declared in LAS Plus as our liability. If what the actual that was happening was higher or lower. What we ended up finding out was materially probably would have created more complication than adding pieces to try and catch us up and be adding adjustments every single month. So we were going to turn that into like end of year project as opposed to let's do this every single month. It's a lot of maintenance just on one type of this.
Yeah, the main contract only had 3 prices. The price was control 700. So that's what was put into LAS Plus. But what is actually happening at the ins and outs? It was like what, $2,000 difference?
Yeah, something in there. It was, we were expecting to see like major difference because the last time we touched any of the Xerox copies, the LAS Plus was like April. This was I guess breathe the sigh of relief, but it also was also like a lot of work that occurs outside of LAS Plus reporting, just to make a determination one way or another as to whether or not we had.
Just one question from following up. It sounds like there's a lot of effort and work into maintaining such a volume of leases. Do you think that a more modern system, with more functionality that maybe fixes some of the pain points, helps you through that process and makes it more efficient for the work that you're doing on those types of projects?
I think it really depends. A lot of VDOTs, some of it is self-inflicted because, there's a large agency and, districts are kind of operating and they have their own business unit. Dealing with, Xerox, outside of central office. So, a lot of our discovery happens in the expenditure review process and not so much in the procurement process because we just haven't been able to reach out that. Working towards it.
Got some questions to ask about reports later on when we get to it. So back to some of the reporting functions.
We satisfy GASB 96. LAS Plus is only part of that. You're not required, you're not supposed to enter any lease until the system goes live. However, any capitalized expenditure that you have spent along the way, you have to confirm that on your year-end attachment to the SEBITA activity confirmation. So all of that is tracked offline. So recently, we have developed forms, start to educate IT people, identify somebody to be in charge of the entire agency of all the multi-year, cross-year projects, started collecting data, and that's a huge undertaking. Talking about contractor cost, vendor cost, and also internal payroll cost. Whoever is involved in developing these system, it still requires some internal work, even though it's lease system. So it's a huge undertaking to collect those costs to satisfy the financial reporting requirement. So I'm not sure if this system can help to gather uniform, to make it a more standardized process, to gather those kind of data.
So I will say that, we're aware of the accounting for, creation and development of software projects where you're tracking the phases, which are capitalized versus which are expensed. And I would say that we're going to have requirements for the new system so that we can accumulate those costs and be able to report on them. And I believe, with that being done in the system, financial reporting drives the needs for accumulating that information via certification at the end of the year. Should have the information they need by June. Does that sound right to all of these groups?
So,
I guess sorry.
go ahead.
If I understand the question for her concern, for development stage of software should be kept as a CIP in FAACS, not for this module. So, yeah.
Well, two different views. You can capitalize, develop software. If you internally develop, you can capitalize.
Yes,
costs and
this
tax.
one's
And you can go through capitalizable implementation costs for SEBITAs that I don't believe those costs are put into LAS Plus, but they still need to be tracked.
So just to clarify, I had a long conversation with DOA to clarify. The capitalized expenditure related to lease should not be reported in FAACS. That's confirmed, communicated to DOA through a year-end attachment before the system goes live. I had that documented actually as our supporting document. This is where the confusion is. The CAP manual does not provide the clear guidance. How do you report that capitalized expenditure related to lease? Some of the staff told me, should I put in the FAACS? No, you don't. You do not put that in FAACS ever. When the system goes live, you record the lease, and then you also report the capitalized expenditure in LAS Plus. Before it goes live, you communicate that to DOA in the year-end attachment. And so I had that whole conversation with DOA documented. as our
I
procedure.
agree with that in the area of Sabita specifically.
So, quick question. Do you have a project ID to go along with your Sabita projects?
You refer to project
Project-
ID,
yep.
yes, internally, it's
And you have
PDH created project ID. Right, it's also created in Cardinal too.
So you have it in both
Project
systems?
number.
Okay.
Yeah, this is our project.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
Not in one of those
Capital,
capital outlay
yeah.
project ID, that had nothing to do with it.
Yep, yep.
Yeah.
But you have a project ID that you accumulate your costs and you do it just like we were talking about for assets. So you have it in voucher expenses and
Payroll
time and
costs
table.
supposed to.
Yeah.
That's what I told
Mhm.
everybody. I said, charge your cost to that
Yep.
project. It's easier said than done. So it's
Yeah.
all over the place, across the state. Sometimes they don't do it. You
Right.
know, I fill up my timesheet. Oh, I forgot to put that project code in. Guess what? We're missing your cost.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, they're supposed to put that project, and if you work on that project. put it
Yep.
in on your timesheet, put that project, right?
Right.
Allocate your time to the project. That's what I told them.
Okay. So in theory, they're supposed to tack it on the transaction. And then, and I know, and again, every agency is a little bit different. Do you then, you capture those costs and then you bring all of that? It's not at a summary level. Is it enough to bring it into the Cardinal General Ledger for project? And
Yeah, all payroll costs, all vendor costs, all contract costs, all goes into the finance module GL at the
Okay.
end of the day.
okay.
If I pull a query this month, I should be able to see all the costs that charge to that project.
Yep.
If
They
assuming
charge it.
everybody did the right thing,
Yep.
but they don't.
So, I mean, that's like an intangible asset classification, right? Does that go into?
Well, it's
No, that's.
it's a lease Sabita, so it's it's the pre-work before it actually becomes the
Right.
Sabita. So, but
But it doesn't fall under GASB 51?
Sabita is not a
It's-
tangible asset. Sabita is a lease.
Not the lease of the software itself, but the setup and the configuration.
The implementation gets tacked on after the Sabita goes live. So it does get added to the Sabita. But
once
not
it's-
as liability, but as an asset.
once it's placed in service.
So Stacy, it does follow a similar, that we capture not the planning, we capture the development, the implementation,
Mhm.
just like, it sounds a lot like GASB 51. Yes, but, so for us at VDOT, we do usually assign those implementation costs, associated with the SPEDA to a UPC. And we track it
Mhm.
as a project.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see it on our ITD's construction in progress
Mm-hmm.
workbook that we're keeping, but we designate it as a SPIDA.
Mm-hmm.
So that when we do our Form 4 to upload our CIP to FAACS, we are not including that SPIDA development implementation
Mhm.
costs. We save that for our DOA submission at the end of the year. Then when Debbie goes to put the SPIDA in LAS Plus, she'll include that implementation cost as part of the asset measurement coverage,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mhm.
Yes, is that sound
Mhm.
right? Yes, okay.
So it's almost as if we need, because I think we talked about project life to date yesterday. And how can we have in our project life to date reports in Cardinal? You know, one thing that and VDOT is a big user of that, but I think for some agencies, again, maybe, we need to resurrect some of that and bring it back to attention because people might not know about all the functionality. But then how do we figure out how to classify that project as as a SPIDA, so that we could then have maybe some reports up front, so that say, let's capture, and then you can run it to say, if by this classification, you could at least see everything that comes up to the general ledger. You know, the pieces, parts of getting people to tag it onto the transaction. You know, whenever we talk about speed charts, it is, you know, maybe that's another thing that we talk through, and the chart of accounts that go into it. And the reason I say that is because in theory, we could have that whenever you're creating that project, then you create a corresponding speed chart, and then you can tell people whenever they're doing their entry of the transactions, they could use that as something. Okay.
As the project is completed, start to do this speed up things, we cut everything and then just put effort to the last stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I'll send it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, and we're talking about classification, where to, how to, so we can, we'll take that back as, you know, because and this goes back to, there's a lot of flexibility in the system, and so some folks are using cost center, some folks are using project, so phases, right? Yeah, I think we have task that's out there, and then like activity code, right? So it's all agent, right? But again, it might behoove us to have some of those chart of account discussions to help the process, because it's not, to your, right, it's everybody using, and how do you make it a more elegant piece, because it's meant to be reporting, right? Yep. And re-education, lots of training, lots of change management, but all of that needs to, you need to have the documentation to be able to support it. Keep it coming. I love it. Not that we're solutioning. Sit down, Julie Sites. Yeah, but those are great things for us to understand and know about, because it, you know, it's not just, again, whenever we talk about we're implementing a module, you know, and there's financial transactions, we need to make sure that we're thinking about the whole process. So really appreciate this. Yeah. Yeah. Right. And I don't know why they always pick on assets and leases. Come on, Gatsby, why don't you find somebody else to pick on?
Also leave last year with 101. Leave liability.
Leave liability. You know what? No bueno. Yeah. Just kidding, Gatsby. I know I said we're being recorded, not for that purpose. Yeah, okay.
On the same subject of there are types of lease changes that should be like a remeasurement or system modification. Do all those seem pretty straightforward on the entry side, and pages that you need?
Track of it. Contract. Changes. I'm fine.
That is explicit in the sometimes even term software. how long they were. Other my stuff. Using any like modification issues.
Answer questions, but proceed, that would be very. By staff.
Step by step
enter
for
Yeah.
adjustments for
Yeah.
Yeah, so, and part of what we will be, and well, CAP always changes, especially whenever, everything is LAS Plus and FAACS today, so, we won't just be find, replace Cardinal. So we will need to go back and update all of our CAP manual for the implementation. We will also have training materials to support. And then for those who have participated in Cardinal projects before, we do something called business process workshops, where once the business process is established, then we walk the agency plus people who are super smart and know everything about it. We walk you through what is the overall process, and then we say what procedures do need to be updated, and we work with you on all of that. So it is big. It's big stuff. But at least, and again, part of it is the documentation and making sure that people are knowledgeable of what's going on. Good stuff.
More question on the subject. So you have a lease or speed that's old, it's been out there for a long time, it's gone through, a bunch of changes and renewals and amendments. Does anybody find that manageable in LAS Plus to see what's going on with that? How do you all feel about the way that, these older leases and speeds look in the system? I've actually found, I really like the change logs and the way that LAS Plus makes a separate record for remeasurements while maintaining the original. Sometimes, it can look like a lot, but it's pretty nice for traceability to see what's going on with those records in the past. That resonate really?
So one of my pain points with LAS Plus is the reporting side of it. It's nowhere near as extensive as that. So if I individually open up a lease, then sure, I can go ahead and access whatever I need to access. But as far as having a full master file like FAACS for the lease portion of it, that's non-existent. So for me to be able to just filter out whatever I need, that would be, but it's not. So I can't really relate. So.
The download leases, is that a functionality that could be used?
Yeah, you can run reports in summary or detail, and you can run for your agency one report that has all of your leases for Savitas at one time. You can also do a download lease table where it will download every detail of every item you've ever put in.
But it also brings in stuff that's expired and not pertinent to what you're doing at this moment. You end up with a lot of noise for a little bit of heat.
That's what I heard from Daniel when you were saying filtering the reports. Big agencies like EDOT and EDH,
Okay.
I'm sure you want to look at specific areas of your lease listing, not just like the.
So perhaps maybe more parameters so that you have that flexibility on what gets pulled and whenever you're doing that entry. Okay. Great.
spent a lot of time talking about step 7, update leases. From there, almost all of the transactions that you enter will require DOA review and acceptance of those changes because either they're remeasurements, early terminations, like transactions that go strictly to DOA or any change beyond 30 days from the initial entry of a record goes to DOA for review as well. So that is step 8, where you email DOA to review and release. If we, proceed to this decision point where DOA accepts the changes, if they don't, maybe you're asking for some more information or to update a field, then you would follow this no route and round back to making more updates to the lease, requesting review, and eventually DOA is likely going to release or accept those changes, where we move to step 9. And in this step, they review the transactions for accuracy, accepted if approved. If the transaction that they're reviewing is prior year, as this decision point at the bottom left covers, then we follow the yes route and they document prior year lease transactions in a spreadsheet that's done manually to track, those types of transactions for the ACPR process. If it's not, DOA's involvement is done, the transaction's released, and we move to step 11. Leases automatically expire when the payment stream runs its course, including all renewal options reasonably expected to be exercised. If a lease was entered incorrectly, and it can't be corrected otherwise, it can be deleted at any time without DOA intervention. But deletions don't leave an audit trail, so everybody is, trained and encouraged to take screenshots to document those types of transactions or deletions. From there, after leases expire, they run their course, we arrive at reporting. And I definitely have a few questions to expand on the reporting discussion that we had before. So in LAS Plus, there's a few financial reports that support daily, monthly, or annual reporting of lease transactions for your review. Are there any LAS Plus reports that your agency used most regularly? Yeah.
Do you want me to flip over to the list?
Any reports utilized frequently?
So starting at the bottom of page 8 in your narrative. We have some short-term lease reports, and we also have the long-term Savita leases, the portion of split leases, and the financial purchase lease reports.
Not exactly, or these don't look familiar.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if there are any LAS Plus reports that you use frequently or regularly. Okay. Download the list. Okay. Summaries. there anything about the reports in LAS Plus that you wish were differently from maybe format, content, or availability? I know that parameters was one piece of it, being able to filter your data easier. Anybody notice problems with how the reports look? What information is displayed on?
So the reports, you can just the lease number. What the lease is now. A lot of those other reports, you know, say this lease, and then they'll list that same lease, like January, February, March, April, May. And sometimes you just want to look at just going on for that month.
Yeah.
And it doesn't even say it, like, it just says your number, so you have to know what your number is, know what lease you're looking at.
Helpful. This is sort of experience that I think that. Are there any reports or data views that you that aren't available that you would like to see? Oh, that this is probably something you can sit on and think about maybe as you're going through those processes. We're always open to get that.
Sure. I'd like to see the stigma. For all the leases, actually by being now you will see the flow. If you know the ending balance was beginning balance, long-term liability, ending balance, beginning balance for long-term prospect, amortization, actual balance, and the interest expense for the year, and then you can play it, right? So like when you prepare the year-end report, look at that period, for example, June. That's the period. We can see that all the that's everything.
Yeah.
So you can have to be helpful from looking for something similar.
Mhm.
Is Coverchance currently does give us that type of info.
Okay.
Easy look at that, some report, we can help all of it.
And it's called, do you know the name of that report? COVID practice. Okay. Okay. Okay.
Just a question about that summary report. So you were saying you see like all of the balances across all the months and kind of information helpful, but do you need to see all of the balances for all the months, or would you be more interested in a report that shows you balances for the leases for any month that you're interested in? Do you need to see the whole schedule?
We do need that. Reason why, because sometimes we do have a leases. The life cycle of these could be different, could be partial short-term, partial long-term. And so that causes the different reclassification of that part. So that flow can give you, okay, for example, 6 months could be short-term, another 6 months could be long-term. So that calculation balance can give you the number, how much you can report as a short-term lease, or how much you can report as long-term liabilities. That's why that flow definitely high, especially for this partial things.
Great. Other thoughts on what reports are data?
I think the same problem that we have with FAACS. We have lots of plus, there's just not enough description fields. And have turnover of capital asset staff. Sometimes that the use of certain description fields will evolve all the time. Maybe customizable or agency defined fields would be nice, so that description 4 would be vendor, you know? So everybody, regardless of who it is that comes in, knows that hey, you put vendor information back. Because we have leases out there that just say fiber lines. And it's like, what am I, you know, what is this supposed to be? And that's why we use external workflows, because we have to have something out there that says this number 816 means this vendor, this contract number, and this IT ticket number, and the same.
Sounds like that's something that you've all experienced as well, is the lack of description. Do you mind flipping back to the
Sure.
So from the reports, step 12, we move to the last step, 13, year-end verification and reconciliation. I understand that there's a lot that goes into this process for year-end, for all of your agencies. Verify and reconcile lease activity for accurate financial reporting. You have to clear everything and make sure that your leases and SPIDAs are in complete state so that we can move on with the year-end process from a financial reporting perspective. We'll look over the flux analysis reports to compare the prior year ending balances to the beginning balances to investigate any differences and resolve those, the way that those match up. And you go through a reconciliation of rental expenses from Cardinal to LAS Plus. So there's a ton to do. And then on top of that, there is the year-end certification to DOA to confirm completeness and identify any sort of timing items like we were talking about earlier. Along with the certification, you also attach any lease information that LAS Plus can't capture. So this is a pretty big pain point, and I'm kind of interested to explore it from your perspective, but LAS Plus can't handle variable payment leases, subleases, or lessor leases. So you all provided as an attachment along with the year-end certification. Does anybody have any of those lease types, the variable payments, the subleases, or lessor leases?
Police chiefs can.
We are as a, we have a big problem as a lessor, but we didn't have attachment, just we have supplement information attachment to provide UA with what's the current revenue and what is the forecasting for the coming on the end of all the contract.